Hey everybody, it's Eric Torenberg, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Venture Stories with Village Global. I'm here today with two very special guests, one of our first portfolio companies, RDMD. We have Onno, Faber, and Nancy Yu, the co-founders of RDMD. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Onno, we originally met, I don't remember, it was 2014 or very early when you were working on Tap Talk in the same building that the Product on Office was at. Why don't you talk about how you were doing Tap Talk, which was a very popular consumer social product, to then coming up with Nancy this idea for RDMD.
Yeah, so we indeed met in 2014, and that was a year that I started getting some health issues. I started losing my hearing on the left side, and then it turned out that I had a few tumors in my central nervous system, so on both hearing nerves and one in the spine. And got diagnosed with a rare disease. So at that point, I didn't know much about the healthcare space, of course. It was, of course, a big shock to me. I was like 33, I think, at the time. But at the same time, like I've been here, like meeting lots of people that are doing amazing things, and not only in consumer or in apps, but also in healthcare technology and genetics. So I happen to have a very good friend who was working in the genetics, and that's how I kind of got started. And later that year, like the next year, 15, I had a tumor surgery, and we ended up sequencing the tissue and doing our own research on it. So that was my segue.
Yeah. And when was the moment where you said, "Wow, maybe this could be a company, not just solve my own problem, but this could be a company. There's an opportunity here"?
Yeah, that took a bit of time. I didn't immediately think, it's going to start another company. Of course, I wanted to spend time on it and learn about it, see what I could do. So the first thing that ended up happening after we were doing our own research is we organized a hackathon, like a science event with SVAI. And there were basically 300 people coming to hack on my data. So basically, I thought like I had this genetic data of my tumor and my blood, and at that point I thought like, what would other people be able to do with this? Because I realized it's not so easy to access this information, even if you know how to look at it. So it ended up being an event. We had 300 people join. Google sponsored it, and it excited the local community here. The science community that was working on my disease, but also, it excited patients to contribute their data as well, which wasn't a possibility. And that's, I think, for me, where I realized, all this data is siloed, right. And patients have the key to unlock it, and maybe we can do something. And awesome. Nancy and I met.
And Nancy, why don't we talk about your story? You were previously you were in private equity, you were an investment banker, you were at 23andMe, and even before joining Onno, co-founding this with Onno, you were exploring different ideas. So why don't you talk about how you navigated the idea maze within healthcare in terms of what you wanted to do next, and then how you ended up starting RDMD with Onno?
Yeah, sure. I left 23andMe to pursue a separate idea with somebody from the company. It was in genetics for a somewhat rare condition, and that kind of set us off on one path. And so that didn't work out after just 2 months. Right. And so I think I met Onno around that time, and we'd just been grabbing coffee and saw him do the hackathon, which was super cool. And I think we just, sat together every week and learned a lot and tried to just talk to a lot of different people about the industry and what the current challenges were in rare disease. So we really started with the problem. We had no solution, and just kind of fell in love with the problem. From my time in biotech and investment banking and in private equity, it was just clear that rare disease was just this this huge opportunity space where biotechs and pharma companies are really excited to develop programs, but there's just no infrastructure to support that. And so as a result, with all this new technology coming onto the market, with new platform technologies and gene therapies and different platform technologies in drug development, they didn't have anything to support their programs when they hit the clinical stage of development.
Even zooming back out for a second, I'm curious how you narrowed in on rare disease, because you like to joke that our friend Afton, who's also a veterinary who runs Modern Fertility, has a very similar background to you, and she chose to go in fertility, and you sort of had a top-down view of a lot of things that are going on in healthcare, and rare disease seems like sort of a small niche. How did you settle in on that versus anything else you could have done in this space?
Yeah, I think a lot of things contributed to that. I mean, one is just there's this long tail of rare conditions, 7,000 of them. And altogether, I think there's 30 million people in the U.S. that have rare diseases. So it's actually a huge problem. But there just hasn't been a great solution for them. Yep. And so, I mean, meeting Onno also contributed to that. Yeah. But one big theme is also just patient engagement. So, 23andMe is one of the few companies that has engaged consumers broadly, but also patient and research communities to actually contribute their data to drive more research. And what better place to do that than in rare disease, where patients have a really, really large need that's totally unfulfilled and nobody's building anything for them. So it felt like it was a really great place to start this patient-centered approach to drug development, because we really need to bridge those two worlds. Right.
And just a last question on that sort of exploratory phase. What advice do you have for other people who are sort of, just left a company like 23andMe and now are, founder dating or idea dating, in terms of when do you, sort of to mimic real dating, it's like when do you know it's the right one that you should really double down on it, versus when do you know you don't actually be really exploring the field more, both whether it's ideas or whether it's potential co-founders?
Yeah, I don't think you can go into it with a timeline in mind. That's really difficult. You can't say, I'm going to give this 3 months and we're going to go through all these founder dating questions and we're going to prove the idea, whether it's good or bad, because I think you're going to be doing that for years and years. Yeah. And so we kind of went into it with no expectations. I mean, a little bit of expectation. We were hoping that something would happen here, but really no expectations around the idea or how we would work together. And we did that for months and months and months. And it just got to a point where it was like, this is really exciting. We've talked to 150 people. I think we know a lot. Let's talk to Village.
Yes, perfect. Okay, perfect. So you're in Village. You've identified the problem. Haven't yet fixed the solution, but you're having a lot of conversations. How does the story unfold from there?
I think so. Yeah, when there have been a lot of iterations in like the way we thought we have to solve the problem. I think the first, for me, realization is like that, rare is actually very big. For me, it was kind of a given to work in rare.
Yeah.
But
scratch your own itch.
Exactly, yeah. So, but it turned, I was frankly a little bit surprised too that it was such a big problem. And also, it's really a way to, I think it could be a gateway to lots of potential solutions that could later be applicable to all kinds of problems. In rare disease, you have these low-hanging fruits. I think we developed a series of prototypes and product, from the beginning. Having a website where patients could sign up, then creating a timeline for them, clinical timeline, and all the conversations we had with the industry partners to see like what is their problem, how can we accelerate this in a replicable way. I think it's just the conversations that we constantly ended up having, the barriers we ran into, going back to the drawing board and keep iterating. And we literally talk to patients, we talk to KOLs, key opinion leaders, research doctors, and industry of all kinds to constantly ask ourselves the hard questions. And at some point, you have more of a clear vector and direction, and you build from there.
Yeah. And how did the idea sort of evolve over time? Like, what are different manifestations of products that you thought you were going to build and then ended up being a bit different, or different go-to-markets that you thought you were going to take and then you ended up shifting?
Yeah, I mean, we first started off with hoping to sequence people. So, we thought, well, in rare disease, 80% of rare diseases are genetic, so why not sequence everyone? And that's what Onno had started with the hackathon. So it made a lot of sense. But what we found, and this was something we kind of already knew, especially from my time at 23andMe, is it's really hard to get the clinical data, the data that's in medical records, that actually defines how a patient is doing and how their health is. So if you have a lot of genetic data, it may not be very useful because you don't know what it means. So the hardest part for the industry seemed to be collecting this clinical data. So that was a huge shift for us. As one thing, we had originally had patients upload their own records, pretty straightforward, and then we realized it was just really hard. It was a tough process, and it was actually much more regulatory compliant if we just did it for them, because then we could create that audit trail. So a lot of different twists and turns, for sure.
And how do you do it for them?
We get their permission, and they sign an authorization, and then we contact their hospitals and we request the records and we make it accessible to them.
Yeah, the first version, there was a version before they could upload their records, which was they could build their timeline. They could build their own patient journey. And then we realized, well, we can do that for them if they upload their records. And then we realized, well, we can get the records for them. So it sort of gradually evolved, and now it's basically a 10-minute sign-up process, and they're done, and the rest is handled by us. And we really love to sort of do everything in-house, because you can build the product, you can do the operations, you can build the product. We have a product for patients, we have a product for research, we have a product for our internal operations, and really doing the work and looking into the future is how can this replicate to as many rare diseases as possible. Building the product around this tailored to rare, we think is it leads to new ways and new solutions.
Yeah. And how have you both thought about go-to-market, and where are you right now in that process? We have about 10 programs active right now. We are signing up patients. And each program, what is an example of a program mean?
So one program, for example, we work on my disease as an example. So there we have patients that join the platform. NF2.
Yep.
They join, they sign an e-consent, they let us know which hospitals they've been, and then we gather the information, the health information.
And how many people have NF2?
In the US, 10,000.
Got it. So you get hundreds or thousands of people who have this.
So most patients that have the disease, you will never be able to get in touch with them.
Right. So
10,000 sounds like a lot, but even if you get a few hundred people on it, it's a big data set. So this is the thing with rare, which is very different from the consumer space, right? Like if you don't have 1 billion users, you don't you don't play. But here with rare disease, like in some rare diseases, you only have 100 patients in total. Yeah. So if you have 20 or 30, it's really good. That's very different. So we built these communities. We work with foundations as well. And then we work with industry partners and the research doctors in the field. It's a lot of, we create these communities around the disease itself.
Yeah. And what's been the most effective method of community getting these programs off the ground? Is it partnerships? Is it bottoms up community building? But what's been most effective?
Yeah, I mean, we learn about new conditions through just either a research doctor or a pharma company that has a need, or patients directly that reach out. And so we'll start a program if we see there's a clinical need. A lot of our programs are in really early stage development where there may not even be any pharma programs, but a lot of them are in conditions where there are multiple pharma programs in development, but they really need our help to accelerate them and get to the next level and unblock them. So we have a pretty wide range. We kind of view ourselves as working as a partner with these industry partners from when they start thinking about a new program to when they get their drug approved, and even further than that. In terms of building community, word of mouth through patient ambassadors, that has been really successful. So because this is a product that is free to patients, and we're providing them a service where they get to contribute to research without needing to leave their house, and be able to participate in a very private and de-identified way, most people get really excited about that. So when you hear about it from another patient or from your community, you sign up because you want to help advance the condition.
And are you, do you have a lot of competition? Are you the only people doing this? And if there isn't a lot of competition, I'm curious, what's the why not? Why not? If this is such a compelling opportunity, why hasn't it been done, 5 years ago, or why isn't it 5 years from now? What's the sort of the why now for the business?
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard. Yeah, that's the thing. It's really incredibly difficult to do this, also in regulatory compliant way for each of these individual communities. They can build so. There are communities that organize themselves in Facebook groups or in a foundation, or there are lots of survey-based registries that are also launched. But if you want to work with clinical data and do data abstraction, build a data model, it's just a really difficult problem to solve. It's really important and it's very valuable, but it's really difficult for these communities to do that on their own. So we decided to start with this hard problem, right? It's easy to build another survey tool, but that's not really going to move the needle. Right. So we want to really focus on something that the communities want but have problems with doing on their own. Right.
Yeah, and years ago, the medical records weren't even digitized. When I was in college, they weren't even digitized. So now you have years and years of medical data that's been digitized that you can actually do research on. And then on top of that, the rapid decline in genomics costs has led to a huge increase in rare disease platform technologies like gene therapies. And so because of that, rare disease is now a thing. There's actually a very compelling business model for biotechs to pursue rare conditions. There's a lot of FDA incentives, increased exclusivity periods, higher pricing on your drugs, faster and more shortened development program timelines. And often you even have these incentives for getting a pediatric voucher that you can go resell for $100 million. So there's a lot of incentives that have been baked in for the rare disease world. And so now it's becoming a really big area of interest for life sciences, but then there's no infrastructure to support it.
Right.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. If I look at my own disease, it's called NF2. Which suggests there is another disease called NF1, which is the case. So there was actually a third one as well that they used to diagnose people with the same thing called NF. And then they found out it's actually completely genetic mutation. It's a different phenotype, different manifestation. So you can kind of keep going down the rabbit hole once you have better tools to diagnose patients more precisely. And the more you think about it, the more these labels are very stringent and sort of inflexible. So I have this label NF2, which means I have a certain issue that you can phenotypically determine. You can see tumors on both hearing nerves. There are certain criteria that are used to diagnose me with this. But some of the therapeutics, some of the platform technologies, they are not necessarily targeting NF2. They might target a sort of specific type of mutation. So you could also label me with the type of mutation that I have, and maybe I overlap with people from another rare disease. So the whole labeling system comes from another period where we didn't have these technologies. So that might change in the future. And if we can really become the rare disease platform and get patients with all kinds of rare diseases on board, I'm really excited what that could lead to.
Yeah. Earlier you said that it could be a gateway into something else. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like if you go further in the future, it might help also more common diseases. But the great thing about rare is to build this technology around rare diseases and rare disease populations, that you don't need thousands and thousands of patients to try something. So we have an opportunity to go really deep and focus on the quality of the data, which is essential for rare disease because you don't have thousands of patients. So our product development and our innovation is centered around the problems that these communities experience. But then, like, once you have those solutions in place, who knows that what you can apply to more broader diseases, for example, as well.
Yeah. And why couldn't Flatiron or Color or 23andMe or someone with a bigger sort of head start in terms of brand and your customer base on a different segment, obviously, why couldn't they do this, or why haven't they done it, or why don't they?
Yeah, I think Flatiron is a pretty different model. They have an electronic medical record system, and they have hundreds of cancer doctors that use it. So they're focused on cancers, and they extract data from those records that they have from the EMR. I think with rare disease, it's really hard because it is a long tail problem. There's 7,000 of them. Right. In some conditions, there are literally 100 patients in the world. And so the traditional way of drug development is you go to these clinical sites like Stanford or Boston Children's or Harvard. And then you find patients there and you get their information from those sites. And that's what Flatiron does. Yeah. But that's impossible in a long tail model when you're looking for these patients who may not even have been identified yet. And so you actually have to go directly to the patient themselves in order to find a critical mass. And that's why we went to this direct-to-patient model. And there's a lot of challenges, but then also benefits to the direct-to-patient model. Challenges being, of course, you have to create almost like a consumer experience. But at the same time, because you have their consent and the ability to recontact them in the future, you can do prospective studies. You can get their genetics, you can enroll them in future trials, because not enough is known about every rare disease, where you do need to get more information from these patients on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, we talked about the long tail nature of this market. What other markets, or what's another market where you find sort of analogous to rare? Because most of the markets I look at are not long tail driven. They're the opposite. Venture capital, for example, you're looking for the outliers, but even like books, movies, I mean, so many things are hits driven from, and the long tail doesn't really matter. What's another market, or were there other things that you think are sort of analogous in terms of people who aren't coming to rare, that can give them a better idea of what it's like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I mean, even if you think of Reddit, it's like a giant community online, or like Indiegogo, Kickstarter, where there's this long tail of small business ideas and technology builders that are all on a common platform that helps them build the infrastructure to make their products a reality. Yeah,
Kickstarter is a great example. If you look at the products that become available through Kickstarter, they would never reach the market in any other way. But through Kickstarter, they find this niche group of people that really want it and want to back it. So that's a pretty good example, I think.
Yeah, across all rare conditions, the dynamics are very, very similar, even though, of course, the patient communities and the diseases are very different. And so the challenges they struggle with, the technologies they need, and the infrastructure that they need to succeed are all very similar. And so it's kind of like, Onno used to mention this, where it's like Uber or Airbnb would have to launch in every new city in a replicable manner, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're launching in new conditions, but the playbook is and the challenges we're solving are very similar.
Yeah. And how have you evolved that playbook over time in terms of what's been most effective versus what you've sort of thrown away or thought would be effective but wasn't? How has that playbook evolved over time?
It's still evolving.
Yeah.
It's massively complex to get it done, but as we move along, there are more and more tools in the toolbox that we develop. There are more and more issues that we keep addressing for patients. Like, we think that if patients get an opportunity to see our office, sit with us, talk to each and every one of us, see what we do and why, that there will be no doubt for them to join. But the interaction time we have with them is usually like a few minutes on the website. So compressing all of that into like a short message and gain their trust, know that we have their back, they're in control. They can opt out of the research consent if they don't like us anymore, which means you're creating real accountability to patients. So if this works, if it becomes big and rolls out and we have all these rare conditions and all these patients, we are kind of their voice, because we need to keep them happy. We need to do things that benefit them in order to make them excited for it. So it works both ways. Trust works both ways. Yeah. And in a way, we're really trying to put rare disease on the map and make it even bigger. It's very counterintuitive, like this. Just like all these long tail problems, it's such a small thing. Like, no, it's really big. Yeah. Just no one has figured out a way how to bundle it, and it seems it's hopefully it will be inevitable that these things need to be bundled with the new technologies that we have available. It's just really hard to develop a therapeutic for like a few dozen patients, right? It's just, it costs too much money. So in a way, you're trying to, on one hand, you're trying to make the diagnosis more specific and make the diseases even smaller in order to provide a better therapy. But on the other hand, you're trying to bundle and expand your label across many of these rare disease populations to make it bigger again. This is really interesting.
Yeah. Totally. Earlier we talked about how you're putting rare disease on the map and there are rare conditions, and there's an infrastructure for it yet. So when you're entering a new market, with creating a new category, how do you think about where on the stack do you need to build first? What's the most important infrastructure that has to exist before other? Because when it's so new, you can do a wide number of things. How have you thought about that, Nancy?
Yeah, I think we always put patients first. So we always start with the patient. We sign up patients first. We talk to them. We learn about the condition. We learn about what studies they're interested in, and we get ambassadors on board. Because without them, there's no use for drugs or the industry. And so we start with them, and then we start with researchers. And then at that point, when you have the support from the patient community, and you have all these patients signing up to your platform, then that's when you provide value to the industry. So that's kind of always how we start. And then we engage industry, and then you get to kind of dictate the rules. So one big problem in drug development is keeping the data from trials exclusive. Right. So if you paid for it and you invested all this money into creating this resource and all this data, of course you want to keep that data to yourself and not share that. But oftentimes, even when a drug fails, that data is kept private and siloed. Right. And so that's really difficult in rare disease when you only have 1,000 patients worth of data to go around. And so we're really trying to proactively build these resources with patients and make them widely usable across many rare disease drug companies.
Why don't you unpack a little bit how the intersection works between patients, industry, and research, and how you'd like it or expect it to change over time?
Yeah, patients need to have a more central voice in drug development, and you see that happen a lot when patients' voice are missed, and then the drug doesn't achieve its goals because it was being built for the wrong endpoints or trying to solve for a problem that patients didn't care about. So right now it's really hard to do that because drug companies traditionally find patients at these clinical sites, at these hospitals. So that's already pretty difficult. Now that patients are all on Facebook and they all have Facebook groups for every rare condition, you can find them much easier. And on top of that, drug companies also can't access the medical data from patients because there needs to be a firewall. So legally, they can't do that because then it would be biasing the data. So that's why they always work with a third party, usually a contract research organization that goes out and gets the data on their behalf, process it in an unbiased way, and then give it back to the drug company so that they can submit it to the FDA. So over time, we think we really want to close that link between patients and drug companies because drug companies need answers and data from patients to make their drugs happen. Patients want a drug. And so when we started this company, it was the mission tied so well with the business model. And that was really one of the reasons why we continued down the path.
Yeah, it's really we're really to try to create a glue between all these different parties. And we are trying to engage all of them. So there's the researchers, they have like unique knowledge. There's in every rare condition, there are a bunch of people that know a lot about the condition. So you want to have them participate and capture this. The different industry partners and of course the patients, if they could play a more central role, they hold the key to unlock it. So the only thing the patient needs to do is they have the decision to join or not, but you don't need a very complex contract that you have to negotiate for a very long time with each and every hospital. Like the patient can choose whether they participate or not, and that is a choice they currently don't have. It currently goes completely behind their back. They don't even know what's happening. So we really want to offer them a choice to be part of it and not be a bystander. And by doing that and organizing it, since we are accountable to patients, we can be the glue between all these different parties.
So in a world in which RDMD achieves its goals, how might, let's say I develop a rare disease and 5 years from now, and RDMD is on the path to success, how is my journey looking different in an RDMD world versus a couple years ago where it didn't exist? What was that tangible, different experience?
Yeah, so 5 years from now, hopefully...
I'm rich on Bitcoin, so...
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully we'll, have a program for you. So then you would be able to join a community of other patients and be part of like a central research data set. Hopefully that incentivizes many different companies to develop drugs and to expand their platform to be useful for your rare disease, for the label that you got. And if we are not working on your disease yet, hopefully you will be able to kickstart your own community and get it going. Ultimately, like we really want to make the rare diseases more interesting for the industry to work on. So even if there is no program yet in existence, if you build all these resources prior, then your disease literally becomes more interesting. It's been fascinating to me to see how much of this is just people deciding to work on the problem.
Right.
That is maybe one of the most fascinating learnings I had. If you're not in healthcare, everything seems so far out and so like magical, like drugs, how you even start. But in the end, it is really just people that decide it's important and there is an opportunity and I'm going to work on this disease. And the sad reality is that you need 10 initiatives for one success.
Right.
But that makes it even more important for this to be a central resource and not everybody trying to reinvent the wheel and do this on their own, because we need to just open access in the market to these rare diseases. So you can have different players.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say a large problem in rare diseases, you often don't understand the disease itself. And so it's hard to even think about a drug program or how to design a clinical trial. And that's what's still stopping a lot of these rare diseases to advance. And so as we learn more about various rare conditions, we're already seeing overlap between many of them. And you'll see different pharma companies in a new rare disease basically model their design of their trial off of a very similar rare condition. And at the end of the day, conditions are just made up of components of different elements of the disease, whether it's weakness, muscle weakness, or lab measures, or ability to see, ability to hear. And so we end up creating all of these modules across rare conditions that can be leveraged by a new company working in a new disease, where they're really just trying to understand a very similar condition that's called something else.
Yeah. And Nancy, can you talk a bit more about how you think about business model, and maybe just zooming out a little bit in terms of like financing of how these drugs get developed, and what are the incentives of these biotechs, and how you expect that might change over time?
Yeah. At a high level, the drug development process starts from science, in a lab, usually academic labs, and then they go to phase 1, where you're testing the drug in healthy people, and then phase 2 and 3, and in rare disease, those are often the same phases. It's very shortened, where you're testing the drug in patients, and then you get your drug approved, and then you still need to understand how the patient community is doing on this condition, so that you can look for different opportunities to make the drug even better, or create a new drug to address a sub-cohort that you didn't properly help. So at all stages, we see a very clear need for our platform, and we're working with companies in every stage. I think it's interesting because on the commercial side, that's where the drug companies have a pretty clear visibility on their own revenue model, and that's where companies like Flatiron and other companies have basically sold their platform and their data. Where we see a lot of interest is on the clinical side, so actually the R&D and the drug development, where you're effectively working on science projects and milestones and projects as a drug company, and you can't even see 2 years ahead. And so it's really important to get the best data there, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to go past to your next milestone. But at the same time, how do you create a sustainable revenue model as RDMD working with these kind of companies? So you kind of have to get creative. But generally what we think is these companies will continue to work with us, even if they're working with us on just one program or one project, because there's nowhere else to get that information at this quality on those patients.
How have you thought about getting creative, to the extent you could talk about it? And how do you, more importantly, what sort of general principles do you advise for other startups who have a sort of long vision of, hey, we're going to capture this unique data and be able to monetize it, but in the beginning we need a way to, 1, get the data, and 2, stay alive until we can do something with that really valuable long-term data. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, getting the data first, definitely de-risk that. And if you can do that, then you can move forward. And just get pilots, get real revenue opportunities. Just really try to understand the value of the data. If it's a nice to have and you're kind of pulling teeth to try to say, well, we can get this and we can get this, that's not what you're looking for. If it's something where it's actually going to make a huge difference in their drug program. So, for example, with one company, they very likely will use this data that we've collected to submit to the FDA to support an NDA, a new drug application. And that's huge, and that's huge value. So looking at where the data is needed most, and knowing that you can work, and proving that you can and have worked in multiple phases of the drug development process, can make it much more confident for the entire company to make bets on earlier stage research and development, clinical development stage programs.
Yeah. And how have you thought about other potential companies that can be built in the space? If we're looking 5 years out, 10 years out, you guys are creating this category. If we're all VCs and we're looking at what other companies might be built in this space, and maybe it's a fraught question because maybe RDMD just cleans up everything. But what else comes to mind in terms of people who are curious about rare disease and want to start a company besides, first thing, join RDMD? What else might exist in the market? Like, what companies will RDMD enable?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I've seen in the healthcare space is that the importance of collaboration is like there are so many companies working in the field, and everybody seems to do something similar if you like look at it from a distance. But if you look closer, you're like, no, they're working on something completely different. It is such a big space, and the problems are massive, and they have so many different aspects to them that you probably need a lot of companies, and you need those companies to collaborate really well if you really want to make a dent. And I think especially in rare disease, that's why we are focused on enabling these collaborations and making that more smooth. Especially there, you need to really pool the resources that you all have. Hopefully we would have made rare diseases more interesting, and there would be a lot of companies that work on rare in 5 years. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially biotechs, as there's all of the, like, technology is going to outpace basically our ability to get clinical data and understand the disease. So there's going to be a lot of scientific targets and compounds and therapies and ideas that are going to face this big bottleneck for what conditions am I going to go after next, to understand. And so really enabling a lot of these new biotech companies. There's a lot of companies in the machine learning computational space that are popping up, all chasing after indications. And helping them build this infrastructure that they need for clinical development and commercial as well.
Yeah. And I remember being at a dinner with for all RDMD investors, and I believe it was Andy from Livongo. Is that his name, Andy? The CEO of Livongo, who he asked a question about existing tooling, and one of the things you mentioned was they're using like pen and paper for everything. So, and he was shocked, and that's even someone is CEO at a big healthcare company. So what sort of, I guess there are a lot of people who are building, like Onno was, companies in the consumer space now transitioning to healthcare. What's sort of shocking or just different about building companies in the healthcare space?
Yeah, there are so many things. I think, like, if I look at our team, one of the things that I'm pretty impressed about every day is how many different sort of quote-unquote departments we have. Even in a small company, like you have so many different different sub-teams in the team to make this work. It's not only a tech company. I think that would be a really big mistake to make this only a tech company, because you cannot solve it with software alone. Right. You have to deal with operations, you have to deal with regulatory, with research, with the business side of things, community building. There's product development. It's just all over the board, and you need to do everything really well, and everything needs to integrate really well. So the metaphor of like building the plane and flying it, like I feel it more intensely than in the consumer space, where you can, with a few people, create a really cool product that can take off. Like, you need more resources if you want to do something in healthcare.
Yeah, and I would say healthcare is all about finding the right incentives for the right parties, because it's one of the only industries where the patient, the person who is about to use the product, isn't the one paying for it. And there's all these crazy incentive problems. And so that was the thing that we really needed to nail from the beginning, of all of these stakeholders that we work with: patients, researchers, foundations, biotech. How do we align the incentives so that everyone wins? Because otherwise it won't work. So that's one of the biggest.
Yeah. Even zooming out from beyond rare just into general healthcare, Nancy, you were corp dev at 23andMe, which sort of gave you a top-down view of what's going on, and you have a private equity and investment banking background, and you've also helped out with us in terms of some of our analyze some of our health investments. Let's say you were a full-time VC focused on healthcare. What would your thesis be, or what are things that you'd be really excited about, or things that you'd not be really excited about? Like, how would you approach the market from a VC lens in terms of what's exciting right now for you?
Yeah, there's so many things. I think personally what I'm excited about is any company that sells to life sciences. Frankly, just because the sales cycles are shorter, there's great value and there's great need.
And is the big one that was really successful Viva? Is that the example?
Yeah, Viva is an example. They're like the classic SaaS company in the pharma space, but companies like Flatiron, companies even like 23andMe. I personally like the life sciences world much more than the healthcare, IT, and services world, although they overlap a lot. Why is that? What's that?
Why is that? Because there's a small amount of customers, and if you get them, you can make a big business? Or why do you prefer life sciences?
I think selling to payers and selling to employers is just really difficult. Proving the ROI can take years and years and years. And as a startup, it's really hard to prove that ROI and stay alive, but be able to get those long sales cycles down. The companies that are doing really cool things with data are very exciting. So using what's already being routinely collected in care or another setting to power research, life sciences, decisions even for payers and health systems, that's really exciting.
Yeah. And what's different about selling to life sciences companies versus selling someone with an enterprise sales background is in SaaS might not realize, or what's sort of unique to building a strong sales team and strong sales sort of company for life sciences?
There's actually a lot of overlap, so it's not
cool.
In fact that different. A lot of it is understanding their needs, understanding their timeline and budget. A lot of it is trying to get to the right person in the organization. So we sell to clinical development folks and commercial folks. And so in pharma, there's just a lot of different titles and different groups that all have very different functions. And it's a classic problem where the research team doesn't talk to the commercial team. So when they get their drug approved, there's this big gap. And so you have to almost talk to a lot of different people in different functions before you get to the right person. But that's also classic in enterprise sales.
Yeah.
I would say it does require an understanding of the science and of the program itself and of the patient population. But that's the only difference.
Looking forward with RDMD, what are you most excited about, Nancy?
A lot of things. I mean, this team that we're building is super mission driven, and so just being around them every day is amazing. I think in the industry, it's crazy to think that you can go from patients signing up on a website to getting their data being submitted in FDA submission without necessarily a lot of middlemen in between. So you can go straight from patients to regulatory grade data, and that's something we're working on.
Yeah. Onno, what would you add in terms of what you're most excited about with the company?
Well, that is definitely something to be excited about. There isn't really a specific thing. Like I really, I am in general excited to be working on this problem. I think we have a long future hopefully ahead of us to keep working on the real issue. People having a big medical problem that affects their life in a big way, all being part of very small groups and feeling that they're sort of left out, but really creating an opportunity for them to be heard, to have a bigger voice, and hopefully to spin up all kinds of therapy programs in their condition. Yeah,
and for builders who are listening to this, for engineers who are listening to this, operators listening to this, and curious to explore, what working in rare might look like. What might you tell them, or where can they learn more?
Working in our team specifically.
Yeah.
I think also, as Nancy mentioned, the team is very mission driven. I think that's super impressive to see. Everybody that's there really wants to work on this problem and help patients, help people. And it's also a very multidisciplinary team, as I mentioned. I think that's also something everybody is really excited about. You're not working only, if you're an engineer, you're not only working with other engineers, you're working with people that do focus on the research. There is a regulatory aspect, there's an operational aspect. So that I think those things make it very different.
And you also have an incredible investor base, led by,
Yes.
we're not tooting our own horn, but led by Lux, but also some really great angels who built big companies in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So the team extends, I would say, to our investors. What I just mentioned about the team is also true for our investors. Incredible backing, incredible people, and also all very mission driven. That everybody sees the opportunity. Yeah. Everybody is in it for the right reasons.
Yeah. Last words, Nancy?
No, I mean, rare is just a different world compared to non-rare, and maybe one day that they will become the same world. But it's such a different world that there needs to be a different solution, needs to be different infrastructure, different software. But what we've noticed is even the people are different in rare. The people in these biotech companies, the people working even as top research doctors at these top hospitals, the people that we recruit, the people that are advisors, our scientific medical advisors, they're all very mission driven, and it's almost like a different breed.
Right.
You know that they're here for one reason only, which is the patients.
Right. And some of the people, or much of the team has a lot of experience, but if you're a talented engineer or designer, you can come in with having no experience and get up to speed pretty quickly. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Leo, Bernie had any healthcare appearance before.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting product problems, UI problems, data architecture problems to be solved. So the problems that we're trying to solve and the products are actually quite interesting from an engineering perspective.
Yeah, we do apply a lot of creativity to the problems that we are solving. You can't really pull something from the shelf that often. People are very creative and driven to learn, and I think that's really important. Yeah,
it's a great note to close on. The company is RDMD. It's one of the most inspiring companies that we've ever worked on, and you guys are the most inspiring founders. So thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Please hit us up at villageglobal.vc/network catalyst.